Hey, everybody! When we think of war, we usually picture massive empires, oil ideology, or a scramble for territory. But what if I told you that there are wars that began because of a bucket, a dog, a pig, or even a pastry chef? Promise. Today we're recounting 6 conflicts that were sparked by motives so absurd they sound like a stand-up routine. Each one has a trivial detail that, combined with simmering tensions, ignited a bloody confrontation. Call to action, hello YouTube. Ready? Let's jump in. War 1. The Football War, El Salvador, Honduras, minus 1969 geopolitical background. In the 1960s, El Salvador was a tiny, densely populated country with very little arable land. Honduras was far larger, but most of its territory was owned by a handful of large landowners. Because of this imbalance, thousands of Salvadorans crossed the border looking for work and land, eventually making up about 10% of the Honduran population. The 1970 World Cup qualifiers forced the two national teams to meet 3 times. The first match ended in a draw. Honduras won the second, and El Salvador won the decisive third game. For Hondurans, the loss was a blow to national pride already bruised by the influx of Salvadoran migrants. On the 14th of July 1969, just days after the Salvadoran victory, El Salvador launched a land and air assault against Honduras. Tanks rolled across the border, and aircraft bombed border towns, officially declaring war. The conflict lasted for days, caused roughly 6,000 deaths, and displaced thousands. The Organization of American States OAS stepped in, negotiated a ceasefire, and sent observers to enforce the truce. Fun fact, both nations were eliminated from the World Cup soon after, and Brazil lifted the trophy. War 2, the Pastry Chef War, Mexico, France menos 1838 after independence in 80. Mexico suffered chronic political instability, frequent coups, short-lived governments, and a mounting foreign currency debt. In 1837, a French pastry chef named Ramontal, sometimes recorded as saw his shop in Taquiba, Mexico City, ransacked by Mexican soldiers. He filed a claim with the Mexican government demanding full compensation for his ruined ovens, ingredients, and lost revenue. King Louis Philippe used the incident as a pretext to press Mexico for 600,000 pesos, an astronomical sum at the time. Mexico, already cash-strapped, rejected the demand, calling it extortionate. In April 1838, the French Navy blockaded the vital port of Veracruz and bombarded its coastal fortifications, keeping the pressure on Mexico for several months. Under diplomatic pressure, especially from Britain, which feared a wider European-American clash, Mexico eventually paid a reduced indemnity, but the debt burden grew heavier. The episode became known as the Pastry Chef War, because a single baker's grievance sparked a naval confrontation between two powers. Side note, although the name sounds comical, the incident illustrates how minor economic grievances can be weaponized for political leverage. War 3 is the Lost Dog War, Greece, Bulgaria minus 1925. The post-war borders in the Balkans were still vague. The 1919 peace settlements left many areas contested between Greece and Bulgaria, creating deep mutual mistrust. In October 1925, a Greek soldier saw his dog dart across the border into Bulgarian territory while chasing a hare. He chased after it, crossing the frontier line. Bulgarian border guards, spotting an armed foreign soldier, opened fire. The Greek trooper was killed on the spot. News of the death spread quickly among already tense troops on both sides. Greece, inflamed by the incident, dispatched a small force of tanks and infantry toward the Bulgarian town of Pastry, demanding a formal apology. The League of Nations intervened within days, ordering a ceasefire and demanding the Greek withdrawal. About 50 soldiers died in the short clash. The dog was never recovered. Take away even a harmless pet can ignite a military crisis when borders are already on a knife edge. War for the Blockade War, Modena. Bologna minus 1325. Italy in the 14th century was a patchwork of independent city-states. Modena was Guelph pro-Papal, while Bologna was Ghibelline pro-Imperial. According to popular legend, Modenese soldiers stole a wooden well bucket from Bologna. In medieval towns, a bucket was more than a kitchen tool. It was essential for a communal water supply. Modena refused, claiming it had already been used by its troops. At Zappolino, the two forces met in open combat. Modena emerged victorious, seized the bucket, and brought it back as a trophy. Modern scholars argue the bucket was merely a pretext. The two cities were already preparing for conflict over political allegiance to the Pope or Emperor. The bucket story gained traction later as a colorful anecdote. Curiosity, the bucket still rests in a Modena museum. Labeled the Bucket of Victory, showing how a trivial object can acquire legendary status. War 5, the Guano War, Peru, Spain, 1864, 1866. In the 19th century, guano, the accumulated excrement of seabirds on Pacific islands, was the world's most effective fertilizer, rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Competing interests: Peru controlled the guano-rich islands of Tinte and Pascua. Spain, having lost most of its American empire, still wanted a foothold in the Pacific and an excuse to demonstrate naval power. The idiotic spark. In 1864, Spain claimed Peru had defaulted on historic debts and, under that pretext, sent a naval expedition to occupy the Guano Islands. War, development. Spanish warships blockaded Peruvian ports and bombarded the Chilean port of Valparaiso, an ally of Peru. By 1866, diplomatic pressure from the United States and Britain, both wary of a European-American clash, forced Spain to withdraw its forces. Fun fact, at the peak of the guano boom, workers extracted up to 12 tons per day on some islands, enduring brutal conditions that later sparked labor unrest. War 60 Emu War Australia to 1932, post-Great Depression, context after World War I. Australian veterans were given parcels of land to grow wheat. The Great Depression had slashed wheat prices, making a good harvest essential for survival. The idiotic spark. In 1932, roughly 20,000 emus migrated from the outback into the newly cultivated wheat fields of Western Australia, devouring seedlings and threatening the season's yield. Government response: the Commonwealth ordered the Australian Defence Force to intervene, equipping 2 companies with Lewis machine guns, 10,000 rounds of ammunition, and a few hunting dogs. Operation failure: over 5 days, soldiers fired about 2,500 rounds, killing only Dezentis emu. The birds proved remarkably agile, scattering in tight groups and often outrunning the bullets. Newspapers mocked the effort, dabbing it the Emu War and publishing cartoons of soldiers chasing flightless birds with machine guns. Final solution: the government abandoned the large-scale shooting, instead offering bounties for individual hunters and encouraging the construction of fences. Over time, the emu population in the area was reduced and wheat production recovered. Legacy: the episode remains a classic illustration of how applying military technology to an ecological problem can be both ineffective and hilariously absurd. It's still taught in military history courses as a cautionary tale. These 6 conflicts prove that, despite all the grand strategies, treaties, and ideologies involved in warfare, sometimes a seemingly insignificant detail can light the fuse of a real, bloody conflict. A bucket, a dog, a pastry chef, or a flock of emus were enough, when combined with pre-existing tensions, to turn a diplomatic dispute into a war. The pattern repeats: existing instability plus a trivial trigger equals Baofa. It reminds us that history isn't only shaped by great leaders and lofty ambitions. It's also forged in the everyday, even the absurd moments of human life. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these stories surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you liked the video, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into weird historical facts. And don't forget to check out the recommended videos on the right. There are more unbelievable wars waiting for you. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Fellow explorer of the absurd side of history. Background music, retro adventure, low volume instrumental track that stays out of the way of the narration. Suggested visuals: map of Central America, El Salvador, Honduras. Archival photo of a 19th century French pastry shop remontel. Illustration of a dog crossing a Balkan border. Photo of the wooden bucket displayed in a Modena museum. Images of guano, rich islands, and 19th century naval ships. Vintage newspaper cartoons of the Emu War.